Hey, good morning. My name is David Green. I am a faculty member at the law school at North Carolina Central University School of Law. I served as the chair of the faculty assembly from June 2018 July 2018 to June 2020. So just recently finishing my term as the chair of the UNC System Faculty Assembly.
And what school did you represent?
So I represent North Carolina Central University.
And how did you first become involved with faculty senate and assemblies?
So 2011, a couple of colleagues at the university recommended that I be one of the delegates from North Carolina Central, part of the UNC system. We actually have an election process, so I had to run for the position and then be selected. I initially was not selected as one of the three, but was an alternate and served my first year as an alternate delegate to the faculty assembly. But the person that I was serving as a delegate, as an alternate for, actually could not make any of the meetings. So the next year, I actually became the permanent delegate. So I had been part of the faculty assembly since 2011.
And are you still involved? I know you're no longer chair.
So this year, toward the end of my term as the chair of the faculty assembly, after the George Floyd incident, one of the last things I did as the chair of the faculty assembly, along as the student body president and the chair of the staff assembly, we wrote a joint memo to, at that time, President Bill Roper and Chairman Randy Ramsey, asking for the creation of a racial equity task force. Both President Roper and Chairman Ramsey quickly responded and created the task force within 24 hours of our request. So I was appointed to serve as part of the task force. So myself and the present chair of the faculty assembly, Tim Eyes, he and I are both representatives on the racial equity task force. So to that extent, I'm still involved, and that commitment will probably run through next semester.
And as the faculty chair, what were some of your duties?
So as the chair of the faculty assembly, so the body meets 6 times during the academic year, 3 times in the fall and 3 times in the spring. So as the chair, I would preside over those meetings. There were a number of standing committees that I would appoint members in conjunction with the other members of the executive committee. So that was kind of a large part of it, kind of driving the body as a whole. In addition, the position requires providing advice for the president of the system. So I would have regularly one-on-one meetings with the president of the system that tend to correspond with our meetings. So if we had 6 meetings, I had 6 one-on-one sessions with the president. So initially it was President Margaret Spellins, and later Bill Roper. So I would meet with the president to provide advice. But outside of our one-on-one meetings, just regularly sending emails and recommendation, at times requesting calls with the president based on whatever particular issue was going on. As well as as part of the UNC Board of Governors, the chair of the faculty assembly sits ex officio on 2 of the committees. So I would sit ex officio on the Personnel and Tenure Committee and sit ex officio on the Education Planning Committee. So required to attend all the Board of Governors meetings and sat ex officio on those, and at times would be assigned to working groups based on different issues that might have come up during the year.
And what skills do you think you would tell someone if they were looking into this or interested in it? What skills do you say this position requires?
It requires really being familiar with the UNC system policies. So it has to be more than knowing what's going on your campus. Um, I would say that I joined the faculty assembly in 2011 and didn't become chair to 2018, but it took probably about those 5 years to really learn all the policies and learn what's going on in different campuses. So, it's most important to me to recognize that the chair of the faculty assembly, in that situation, I'm not just representing North Carolina Central. I'm representing the 16 public universities as well as the high school for science and math. That means I need to be familiar with the issues on those campuses as well. And recognize how the issues are different. What's going on at Western Carolina is going to be different from what's going on at University of North Carolina at Penn, as opposed to what's going on at Winston-Salem State or Elizabeth City. So it's extremely, you have to be familiar with what the needs are of all the campuses. You have to be familiar with the policies, and you have to be, in my view, and this is not necessarily a view that everyone would agree with, you have to be politically savvy. You have to recognize that the members of the Board of Governors are political appointees, and you have to interact with them um, with that understanding. These are not folks who have spent their years as administrators within the USA system, but they do, because of their position on the board, have authority with respect to the policies. So it's extremely important that you have the ability to be politically savvy, to not let politics interfere with your objective on behalf of the system. So you cannot be impacted by whether or not it's controlled by Democrats or Republican. You have to be an advocate for students and student success. So that requires, to me, a certain sense of political savvy. It also requires that you check your ego at the door. You cannot have a strong ego in this position. You're representing too large a group of people, 15,000 faculty members within the UC system, and not everyone's going to agree. Some folks will be very vocal in their disagreement. So you have to have tough skin, and you have to be sensitive to the range and diverse group of individuals that you represent.
And what are some of the challenges this position faces?
I think the biggest challenge is finding a way to respectfully be an advocate where you're not patronizing, where you are willing to engage in dialogue. You meet the person where they're at in terms of what their understanding and skill set is. You respect that authority, that they have. Um, and you recognize that there's just so many different people with so many different issues, from a full professor at a university, from a a instructor who has a fixed contract term. You represent all of that, and you have to have that balance to do that. So, and recognizing that that the system is not perfect in terms of how the decisions are made. One of the things I found most almost ironic when I got into it is that the chancellors and administrators at certain levels are not necessarily the final decision makers. So you have to find a way to be very tactful, making a point, and make sure that you don't lose sight of your objective by being overly emotional. That's to me the biggest challenge is maneuvering with the different players that impact the system.
And what's something you're most proud of from your time as chair?
I, I would say one of the things I'm most proud of is being able to establish relationships with the board and the system president and the system administrators, that was based on mutual respect and open door policy. And during my time as chair, I had the cell phone of both of the chair of the board of governors. I had easy access to them. They regularly took my calls. They regularly responded to my emails. They did not perceive my relationship with them as adversarial. And I think because of that, I would like to say it allowed the body to be heard on issues that in the past had not been heard. Um, I would be candid. I have to be candid and saying that not everyone agreed with that approach. And I think that, the challenge was finding the balance. To me, it was most important that I was at the table when the decisions were being made. I did not want to read about the decisions in the newspaper after the fact. From my perspective, that I'm not effective as an advocate if I'm not in the room when the decision was being made. So because of that, it was most important that I had a relationship um, with the senior administrators within the system and the board that was based on mutual respect. And I'm convinced that I was able to accomplish that. Now, in exchange, I've always said both to the president and to the chair that our relationship has to be based on mutual respect, but it also has to be based on candid dialogue, candid exchange. Um, and that candid exchange should be private, should not be in the newspaper. Because if you do it in the newspaper, you lose the trust of the person that you're speaking with. So I would say one of the things I was most proud of is developing that working relationship with the president, the chair of the board, the different board members, such that my voice can be heard on what I perceived as very important issues.
What's something that happened during your time as chair that you find most memorable?
Mm. Now, that's a tough one because the 2 years as chair had a lot of at times drama, a lot of issues. So during my 2 years, and when I started, Margaret Spellings was the president, and less than a third of the way through my tenure, she resigned as president, and Bill Roper became the president. There was a lot of drama on campuses. Chapel Hill had a big issue with respect to Silent Sam. There was in-house fighting with board members, publicly and privately. Um, there was resignations of board members. Um, it's hard it, to kind of answer that. I guess one of the things that stand out to me, and it may be one of the things I think I was proud about, is that when there was a battle between the legislators and the governor on the budget, that as chair of the faculty assembly, I was invited in to work with the president and the senior administrators um, to draft an op-ed in support of approving a budget that was best for the system. The lack of budget would negatively impact in Elizabeth City, UNC Penrith, Western Carolina, Eastern Carolina. And I was part of the team in an effort to say, well, how can we fix that? With all the drama and emotion, I would like to think that's one of the things that stands out for me because it demonstrated one of the best partnership efforts during my time.
And what would you say is one of the biggest takeaways you have from that time?
The, to me, the biggest takeaway is recognizing the importance of faculty input on policies. That, as I indicated earlier, we're talking about over 15,000 faculty members within the system. And faculty members as individuals and as groups have to have different issues. We need to have certain advocates who are very vocal and even adversarial when need be. But you also need to have advocates who are able to sit at the table. To me, one of the most important things is having that process where faculty members are. When I look at the stakeholders and constituents of the UNC system, you got the senior administrators, you got chancellors and vice chancellors. You have our most important stakeholder, students. But students to come for a fixed term, hopefully in 4 years. Some take 5, some take 6, but most of them, the objective is to do it in 4. We have graduate students, we have professional students, but they're all there for a fixed term. Staff, like faculty, are there long term. You have, staff and faculty members who have been there over 30 years. So faculty and staff, I would include, have the most important perspective because of their longevity and because of their long time commitment. So because of that, it is crucial that both faculty and staff are always at the table, because we can always look back and say, yeah, we did that 10 years ago. This was a problem. If we do that now, what's going to be the impact in 5 years? So it's the faculty and the staff that are in the best position to bring that perspective. And it is crucial that if you're trying to have a strong system that's committed to student success and student access, that the faculty have to be key players in driving what's going on at the university. Because even chancellors, fixed term, maybe 5 to 7 years, chancellors move on. It's the faculty and staff that are there long term and should therefore have an extremely important voice.
What's something that you wish you may have known going into the position?
That regardless of what you whatever approach that you made to fixing a problem, that you're going to have a group that was going to oppose it. That there was nothing that was going to be done where you would have 100% agreement. Even when you kind of look at it, well, this is positive, I can't imagine anyone would disagree with this. And you had folks that would disagree with it. And then ultimately recognizing that you can't worry about that. You got to live with your convictions. You have to have a deliberative process for making decisions that's inclusive. And then once you've gone through your process, you've talked to all the stakeholders, you can take in consideration all the viewpoints, that you left your ego at the door, and you come up with what you feel in your heart is the best for the system. You just do what you think is best and can't worry about the critics.
Adding to that, is there any advice you would offer to future chairs?
Well, I mean, it's more challenging in COVID, but one of the things that I realized was important to do is to actually do campus visits and sit down with faculty, staff, and students in their respective communities. For me, that was most important in me being able to say I represent the UNC system. So I did a lot of campus visits, attended a lot of faculty senate meetings, got a chance to meet with students at the School of the Arts, Science and Math, Western Carolina, Asheville, just interacting with students. I spent one Saturday at A&T Student Union interacting with students. So if you're representing the system, you need to understand the system. You're not representing your campus, you're representing 17 campuses. And for me to be able to do that, for any chair to be able to do that, you need to learn what that campus's needs are, and they need to know who you are. So probably one of the things in hindsight, I did a lot of that as my term started, but part of the term as being the chair of the faculty assembly, you actually spend 1 year as chair-elect. So you serve 1 year as chair-elect and 2 years as chair. In hindsight, I would have started those campus visits earlier. You're always somewhat reluctant because you don't want to step on his toes of the present chair because you're not the chair yet. But the campus visits allowed me to learn more about what was going on. And the other thing I think is important to know, you just have to know the UNC code. It's almost like you're getting ready for the exam. You have to sit down and read through the code and know what the code requires, what some of the policy decisions are. And you also have to kind of do your homework and find out what has happened in the last 5 to 10 years. I had the benefit of being able to talk with a number of previous chairs. So I regularly interact with Steve Leonard, who was the chair during some point when I was there. Catherine Rigsby, I had a chance to interact with her. Judith Wagner, had a chance to interact with her. That's crucial. Gabriel Lugo, was the chair during the time I was chair-elect. So talking to previous chairs is crucial as well. Knowing what has occurred in the past, and knowing even if you choose to take a different position, you're being informed. You're doing it in an educated way. You're not just, you took a position totally different, and you didn't realize you took a position totally different. That should never happen. You may say, times have changed. I'm being very calculated. I've consulted other folks about this change, but I'm not willing to make the change. But it has to be an informed decision. So interacting with previous chairs, knowing what issues have come up in the past, is extremely important. And then doing your homework, find out who are the members of the Board of Governors, who appointed them, what is their thought process, what is their background, what's going to be important to them, and then finding ways to develop a rapport. And then learning who's in the system office. Everyone knows who the president is, but interacting with the senior vice president for academic affairs, interacting with the senior vice president for strategic planning, the media, the human resources, senior vice president for human resources, communication, legislate, everyone within the UNC system, spending time with them. And I would say, as during my time as chair of the faculty assembly, I probably gained about 10 pounds just for the lunch and breakfast meetings with system and members of the Board of Governors, because that's doing the homework and knowing what's going on to me is an extremely important part of the job.
Is there anything else in closing that you would like to share or express?
Other than, my thoughts are the time as chair of the faculty assembly, it is extremely important work. It was an honor to be in that position, but I never took for granted the role and the importance. The system has been around for a while. There's a lot of change that needs to occur. To no surprise, there's not a whole lot of diversity within system leadership. Um, if you look at the history of the chairs of the UNC system, obviously it's not the most racially diverse. If you look at the representation from historically Black colleges, I was only the third to serve in that position from a historically Black college. And from what I can tell from looking at the list, the only one to serve a full term. It looks like two others completed someone else's term, because one chair had a promotion during the chair's time period, and one chair actually, unfortunately, died in office, and someone else repeated. But what I can tell from looking at the list, it looks like I was the only one to serve a full term upon being elected who represented an historically Black college. So, and that, wasn't lost by people. The board itself is not the most diverse board. So when you see an African American male presenting to the board, I was one of the first chairs, if not the first chair, who the board allowed to do a 5-minute presentation at every other board meeting. That was one of the first times the board had approved. So while the chair has served ex officio on committees, to actually present in front of the full board during the full meeting, that was new. And it was, somewhat, historic. Ironically, my first year as chair, the student body president was an African American woman. So it wasn't lost that the chair of the faculty assembly, the student leader were both African American, ironically, both from North Carolina Central University. So, that was an historic moment. It was an important moment. It was a message to the state. So I urge faculty to always get involved. I urge folks to, look at and consider this leadership position. It is an important position, and it's an honor to do it. It's a lot of work. It is its own full-time job, but it is something that you have to do. It has to be a love that you're committed to, because you're committed to the system.